Thanks, everybody. And that was a fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed that. And I agree with Ali and Mick. We really do need that type of innovation, don't we, in our service. And it's really exciting to think that that's how far we can progress to, which is, I suppose, the purpose of a day like today is to challenge all of us to look at where we can go and what we can do. I suppose the biggest challenge, and for the little bit of time I have just to wrap up, I know you've had a long day. I just wanted to set out the two main events that will influence ED and also influence your life as an ED practitioner, an ED nurse working in these departments, which are and remain overcrowded, and the port of call for everything that hasn't its own pathway or stream. And I think the bigger issues that we're constantly challenged with are the issue of staffing in the ED department, not just determining the correct numbers for ED patients, but also for those who are cared for within the ED. And number one, determining how many staff we need and the right skill mix, but two, where do we get them? And these issues are still, I suppose, some of the bigger challenges that we have. The good news is that the task force on nurse staffing and the pilots that have just come to their conclusion show some very, very encouraging research. And I think from the report we have from Jonathan Drennan and his team who conducted the research, again, it mirrors the surgical and medical wards, the determinant of staffing when it's scientific and when it's applied correctly. And when you have the correct staffing levels, it benefits the patients who attend, the wait times reduce, the outcomes improve, but more importantly, it increases the retention factor among nurses working in these departments, but also increases job satisfaction quite significantly, from 54% right up to 80%, which in any measure we have to be very pleased about, because we know that we have been lobbying and pushing and requesting from the Department of Health for a long number of years, for going into the second decade, to have the correct measurement. And a great deal of credit goes to all of you who are working in the hospitals where the pilots were conducted, because it isn't easy to pilot something like this. There's a lot of additional paperwork, etc. There were only a small number of hospitals, but the evidence is transferable. It's quite clearly transferable. It's quite clearly going to be of benefit. And it is because the INMO pushed and obviously went on strike for models, for staffing. We now have the evidence, and the next step is implementation and funding for all 29 units, not just the pilot units, and also looking to ensure that the Sláintecare report, which tries to imagine a country where you have different pathways, you have a far more sophisticated out-of-hospital care network, primary care network, and that reduces the burden on EDs. It reduces the volume on EDs, and it provides alternative pathways for some of the care that currently is provided in your departments. So tomorrow we meet the Department of Health on the Sláintecare model, on their network, on their recently published pathway. We haven't had a consultation on it to date. And again, this is a very important piece of work. It's really important that we have input and that our executive, the people you elect to represent you, and again, great credit due to all of your elected representatives on the executive. They are very clear in their vision. They understand what's needed, and they're not afraid to articulate it at any forum. And your president, Karen, who spoke to you this morning, will be with us tomorrow at the meeting. And again, we will be pointing out to Laura McGahey and her team that in order to solve the ED problem, in order to solve the overcrowding problem, we have to get real input of sláinte care. And we have to stop just referencing from the political system, you know, it's when sláinte care. It seems to be a blanket that covers all ills. But the bottom line is we continue to count on a daily basis the ED trolleys for a reason, because the problem hasn't gone away. And regardless of policy documents and policy development, we will continuously on a daily basis remind everybody that your world hasn't changed and the world you work in hasn't changed. The violence and aggression against nurses in EDs hasn't reduced. The staffing retention problem hasn't improved. And the only improvement from a policy point of view is that we have now got a policy document which will take Ireland's delivery of healthcare into a new era and take the pressure off our acute hospitals. That's correct, that's right, we support it, but it needs to happen. So implementation, and our role is, as your trade union, to ensure that your voice is heard in implementation, that you're consulted and that your union is consulted on your behalf in relation to how the implementation of these policies happen, and that people who are implementing the policy are not speaking on your behalf without having consulted with you, and that's centrally important to it. So the good news is the framework on nurse staffing is very helpful to us. It provides an awful lot of evidence that's really good. It certainly is a new model of measuring your work, but it supports very definitely the fact that without the right skill mix and without the right numbers, the pressure on both the wait times, the KPIs that are always measured, and also the staffing themselves and our ability to retain nurses working in this high pressured environment are interfered with and hampered negatively. And the opposite is the effect when you correct the staffing levels. So the good news is the model is correct, the determinant is correct. We now need the political backing to fund it, to make sure that it happens and that we have innovative retention and recruitment measures for nurses. And I think it's a very exciting time from the point of view of the framework, because it is the first in a number of countries. We're the first country that will have evidence of such high caliber. And again, a great deal of thanks goes to Jonathan Drennan from UCC and his team, who have done an excellent job, as they did in the surgical and medical task force, of being objective and producing evidence that simply cannot be argued against. One of the more interesting factors and stats when I was reading through their draft report was the number of the uplift that was required in some hospitals. In one hospital, the uplift was 27 whole-time equivalent. So when we say we're understaffed, it is so helpful to be able to point to this document and say, for example, in this hospital, here's the size, here's the catchment area, here's what our members have to deal with. And here are the number of patients under their care on a shift. Now look what happens when you correct the staffing level. Look at the number of patients under their care, the reduction to that, and the better outcome, the improved outcomes. So I would encourage those of you that haven't seen the preliminary report, we can, and I think it would be important. I'm looking at Ollie, Mary, Mick and Karen on this one. I think it would be important that we have a specific day for INMO section members where we ask the researchers to set out the evidence and their findings, and also ask our members who work in the pilot hospitals in South Tipperary General, in Cork, in the Mater, and also in Ennis, that they would come and tell us what their experience was and the difference, the pre and post, during session 1 and session 2. So all of that is, I think, important for you. It's important for us to use to ensure that we improve the conditions, the working conditions. I suppose 2 other issues, very, very briefly, and I know you've had a long day and a lot of very interesting speakers. I think the President did set out this morning that we continue to meet the HSE on the separation of COVID and non-COVID care, the change to your working environment, the fact that albeit the numbers, the ED trolley count numbers have reduced. But what we constantly advise the HSE as your employer, that you are providing two services now with one workforce, and therefore that has to be taken into account, and that the health and safety consequences of that have to be taken into account. So we are in talks with them. We are en route to the Workplace Relations Commission as a grievance, but also you might recall there was a task force set up by the now Taoiseach Leo Varadkar when he was Minister for Health way back in respect of a governmental department looking at, chaired by the Minister for Health of the day, at EDs. All of this led into various policies that have subsequently been introduced in respect of pathways of care. This task force was separate to the INMO industrial relations interaction with the HSE from the point of view of staffing and skill mix, etc. This task force was useful in that a lot of information that otherwise we would not be able to have access to, or indeed have any influence over, was shared. It met 4 times a year. Its last meeting was early 2020, and it hasn't met since, obviously because of the pandemic and the various availability of both the SDU staff members and Department of Health, etc. But I think many times we have, and the executive have said to us, you know, is there a benefit to being party to a task force like that? My opinion is there is, because otherwise your jobs, your environment are being discussed at a level and your input is not there. And I think the position the INMO takes on these matters is, if matters relating to nursing are being discussed, or how nurses work or how they should work, well, their voice has to be part of that conversation. We are gone beyond a time where people tell us what nurses will do or how they should do it. We want to be part of that conversation. We will continue to seek involvement at every conversation where the business of nursing and how it operates and how it develops and how it evolves is discussed. And I think the last presentation is a really good example of where we can go. And I think days like this are really important for all of us to broaden our view and our ambition in respect of where we can go. So for me, I think that is as much as I wish to say to you. I want to thank all of the speakers, and also I want to thank Mary, Mick, Ollie and Karen on your behalf for today and for the very good job you did on chairing the meeting, but also for your input at executive, to Mary, Ollie and Karen, your constant reminder that these issues are on the agenda, are a matter of real significance. And again, after tomorrow's meeting, we'll be issuing a notice to all members which will set out what exactly the plan from a nursing perspective and the focus we have from the implementation of Sláintecare. Thank you, and it's important to have these meetings regularly. I know Mary and Mick and Ollie would say this is a prime time to say, and any of you who want to be involved in the section, please don't hesitate to come forward. It is really important that you have a space for your professional issues to be addressed, as well as updates on industrial relations. But the purpose of the section is for your professional development, your professional conversations, and your professional peers to speak to you. So Gurmila Mahagav, and thank you very much, and looking forward to our next engagement with an overview of the final framework output.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil.